Good for you. You gave me strength that I need. That they couldn't make head or tail of them. You can do two things at one time. It's out of the question. Do them one by one. Bob, don't disturb her. Mind your own business, he whispered. If he persisted bothering her like that, she'd lose her temper. He was so charged that he couldn't resist temptation. Stop making a fuss. It will get him enough, she shouted. There's no point in talking back to Nick. He's the dictator, so to speak. They are very polite in his presence, but actually, they always talk about behind his back. You despise Nick, don't you? On the contrary, I look up to him. His constant insults aroused her anger. I'm fed up with the judgment papers and the pouring coffee. I made up my mind to quit. In reality, many people have difficulty in making ends meet. How can I get by on 100,000 a month? Female clerks will never complain about their routines, which are not challenging at all. Thanks to fundamental restructuring, our surplus has surged threefold. Many people today think of loyalty to a company as an absurd notion. I have to commute all the way from the distant suburb. I'm sick of it. I went to spend the rest of my life pursuing my ideals. After retirement, Teresa devoted herself to caring for orphans. For the sake of children in need, we cooperated to collect donations. The charity named after a man who gave away some 2 billion yen. His autobiography was released today and sold out by noon. Ted, who is often referred to Malmo integrity, is gonna for run for mayor. The candidate is disappointed by outcome of the election. The municipal council should concentrate on specific issues. It is a case that those who live on a pension are forced to lead a hard life. We should leave out this data. It's far from accurate. We tend to associate to politicians with hypocrisy. They are primarily concerned with taunting us, not with enhancing our living standards. Ramanuja exerted a dominant influence on the Conservative Party, but now his power is diminishing. The spokesperson refused to make any comment, saying it's under investigation. The police said they are pulling strings behind the scenes. The executive entertained bureaucrat at Ryotei, or exclusive Japanese restaurant, hoping for something in return. His secretary flatly denied leaking any confidential information. No one dared to contradict his or her employer for fear of being fired. He sacrificed his promising career to retain his dignity. I might work myself to reconcile to my fate. He was about to commit suicide by swallowing poison when he thought better of it. The vague rumor proved to be false. Nevertheless, some skepticism is lingers on. A senior official is suspected of accepting bribes from a company, but there isn't sufficient evidence to arrest him. Jason, who was in charge of the project, was dismissed for corruption. To my knowledge, he was not involved in the fraud scheme. They found out the truth while examining a pile of relevant documents. During the trial, it came to light that they had been covering up illegal transactions for decades. The detective took down his testimony on the spot, word for word. For the first time in my life, I felt a pang of conscience, but there was no other way out. I am still haunted by a vivid nightmare I had last night. By and large, reporters don't hesitate to intrude on one's privacy. He also revised his manuscript over and over again. He's second to none when it comes to finding fault with others. On the whole, the elite are not sensitive to criticism. When a tabloid revealed that he was a drug addict, his reputation was all but ruined. They considered aspects from the defense program and pointed out the numerous flaws. Section 35. We will not tolerate anyone who engages in terrorism. The another level was ultimately captured and confined to jail. Troops were swiftly called in to put down the riot. We shouldn't appear to be instead of resorting to violence. I suggest we adopt flexible tactics for the moment. The armed forces succeeded in occupying the entire territory. Under the circumstances, the enemy had no choice but to surrender. They can't hold out any longer. 2 hours later, the hostage will be set free. Under the reign of tyranny, innocent people were deprived of their citizenship. Some soldiers were reluctant to obey the command. His regime was bound to collapse. The Allies condemned the invasion as a violation of UN resolutions. We cannot rule out the possibility that civil war will break out in that country. The colony declared independence and became a republic. An immense monument was erected of honor of the noble patriot. He got out on his knees and prayed for the souls of the deceased. The Supreme Court is located near the Imperial Palace. The protest group protested against the ban on abortion. Senator Ford remained neutral in the bitter controversy. Ford has been in a difficult situation all week long. He is no longer capable of coping with it. The summit talks are to be broadcast simultaneously throughout the world. Diplomatic dialogue helped to put an end of the conflict. Johnson was appointed as a goodwill ambassador to foster mutual understanding between the two nations. The specialists predict international tension will build up. In my opinion, permanent peace is nothing but an illusion. Ethnic minorities struggle against prejudice, poverty, and oppression. We must make every effort to do away all discrimination. The immigrant has endured physical and mental pain. The amendment was rejected because it didn't take racial diversity into account. Needless to say, the refugees are longing for freedom. According to a survey, 3 in 5 people today are indifferent foreign affairs. What will become of the Japan-US relations if the security treaty expires? Unless Japan eliminates its unfair tariffs, the US will impose sanctions. Trade friction might arise between the two nations at any moment. Our top priority is to settle dispute once and for all, so we are ready to meet them halfway. The federal budget was nearly approved by Congress. He argued that the administration must look for alternative sources of revenue. A poll that overwhelming majority is in favor of registration. The cops are searching for clues to the brutal murder. That must be insane. He can't distinguish vice from virtue. The fingerprints left on the weapon correspond with the suspect. It took us all by surprise when the noted psychologist was accused of kidnapping. The jury's guilty verdict gave rise to a widespread debate. The man pleaded for mercy, but he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for his crime. The officer on duty perceived the elderly man coming up behind him. He caught sight of the thief attempting to break into the house. The day before yesterday, he witnessed a weird incident in the wilderness. I became aware of someone staring at me from across the aisle, so I turned around, but there was no one in sight. She screamed of horror as someone took hold of her arm. Informed of her safety, he breathed a sigh of relief. The bullet penetrated his chest, leaving him in critical conditions. At present, it's still uncertain whether the delivery of an accident. A dairy caught fire and burned down, leaving a heap of ashes. All of a sudden, the fireworks warehouse exploded, and it took 2 days to put out the blaze. A bomb went off in the 30-story building, and more than 50 people are seriously wounded. A cargo vessel bound to the ascent sank in the Mediterranean without a trace. The reckless one froze to death during the expedition to the Antarctic. The tragedy must be remembered so as not to be repeated. The accident and offered profound insight into ancient civilization. Giotto is credited to sowing the seeds the Italian Renaissance. Bob mounted the portrait in a fancy frame, but it was upside down. This magnificent cathedral dates back to the Middle Ages. The ancient religion inspired him to create splendid sculptures. They explored the desert in search of the buried treasure. The millionaire instead of acquiring the masterpiece, no matter how much it cost. Myths and legends should be handed down from generation to generation. The language is fluent in several Chinese dialects. The tribe worships its ancestors and speaks its own language, which is not familiar to us. The anthropologist says all the customs still prevail in the province. The wicked witch cast an evil spell on the man and turned him into a bag. They proceeded along a steep path, which was the sole access to the border. When a big ape emerged from the cave, they got frightened and ran away. Believe it or not, I saw an alien and they vanished. Give him a break.